As residents of Port Arthur relive the massacre, some remarkable stories are emerging. They're tales of bloodshed and lucky escapes, and of astonishing acts of bravery.
With the dead outnumbering the survivors 2 to 1, there aren't many who can tell police exactly what happened at Port Arthur yesterday. Those who can have told of how they'll be haunted by their narrow escapes. Hobart woman Karen Jones said tourists thought the sound of gunfire was part of some historic reenactment at the infamous penal settlement.
It was just like a cannon going off. We thought it was all part of the show. We were going down to check out what was going on, you know. Thought it might have been a little bit of extra on the side, so like you get the tours around there, and we thought, well, they were letting off cannons and...
Her boyfriend, Philip Milburn, says the shooting was not as random as initially reported.
I mean, if we walked past him and we went the other way and he went to the shop, I think, well, if he got out of the car and started shooting straight away, well, we might have been the first, maybe.
The shock of their encounter with the gunman was still setting in today as they recounted the panic of the scramble to safety.
A pregnant lady, Karen, she was there. She just couldn't stop vomiting. She was sort of panicky. There was an old guy upstairs. He'd lost his wife. He couldn't find her, but they found her downstairs.
He just, because he couldn't get downstairs, too many people, and everyone sort of passed the message on. They found her.
So there would have been people in there who may have lost loved ones who didn't know what had happened to their loved ones.
Could have been.
Flags in the Commonwealth buildings throughout the country will be flown at half-mast today as a mark of national mourning for the victims of the Port Arthur massacre. It comes as grief-stricken friends and relatives try to come to terms with their loss.
Zoe Hall was a 28-year-old Sydney solicitor with everything to live for. She was in Tasmania for a friend's birthday. She was one of the first to be shot down. Salvation Army officer Tony Kiston died in the arms of his wife.
As Tony lay in the arms of his wife, he said, as a true Christian, I'm going to be with the Lord.
In Victoria at Redcliffs, just outside Mildura, flags flew at half-mast and the streets were nearly deserted.
So very quiet. There was no breeze, no birds, no nothing.
Ron Jari, a retired fruit grower, and Dennis Lever, the local jeweller, died protecting their loved ones.
Ron and Dennis were great blokes, and none of us can really understand.
Ron Jari's neighbours told of his extraordinary kindness.
A gentle man with a lovely personality who loved life.
Flowers placed near the Jari home and outside the Levers shopfront spoke eloquently of how their town regarded them. In Melbourne, the family of massacre hero Peter Nash were today stunned by his death. Mr Nash was gunned down shielding his wife Carolyn from a bullet.
Peter knew what was coming and he completely covered her whole body.
Dunstan, a small potato farming community near Ballarat, lost 2 of its most respected residents. Merv and Mary Howard were shot dead while enjoying a rare holiday. They leave behind 5 children.
The community's reeling from it. It's absolutely devastated. I think that we've lost 2 such fine people as they were.
Merv has been the pillar of football in Ballarat for the last 16 years as chairman of the local board.
Flags at the Kilmore Golf Club were at half-mast, 3 of its members among the first to die inside the Broad Arrow Cafe. 69-year-old Kevin Sharp was shot dead shielding his wife from the hail of bullets. Sadly, his younger brother Raymond and friend Wally Bennett died seconds later.
Mates all their lives, and unfortunately they died together.
In Perth, Premier Richard Court was one of the first to learn that Western Australians had been caught up in the tragedy.
The whole incident is just sickening.
A young woman from the Perth suburb of Balga, 21-year-old Kate Elizabeth Scott, was about to start a new job, her life cut short with a gun blast. Tonight, the scale of the tragedy detailed in the long list of victims. Tracy Horn, 7 News.
Tasmanians have been disgusted by a Facebook site claiming Martin Bryant did not carry out the Port Arthur massacre. Instead, it blames a former policeman. Michael Dyson's trying to have the offending page removed, so far without any success.
Martin Bryant actually pleaded guilty to shooting dead 35 people at Port Arthur in 1996, but now an outrageous and very public conspiracy theory has been flagged on Facebook, declaring former policeman Michael Dyson was the gunman.
These people that are involved in this are just raving lunatics as far as I'm concerned. They're showing no sense at all.
Mr Dyson's only involvement in the case was to search Bryant's home after the massacre. Now the retired cop has had his face plastered over the site, as well as his contact details.
There's freedom of speech, that's a fair argument, but then there's also the responsibility that comes with that, and someone must be held accountable for what has been put on the internet.
Disturbingly, a handful of Facebook users seem to agree with the theory that Bryant was innocent, while others registered their disgust at the site. Police have been contacted over the webpage. They say they are powerless to act. As well, Mr Dyson has requested Facebook remove it. That was 4 days ago, but still there's been no action.
When the community itself rises up and revolts, then more than likely they will bend to popular opinion, whether it's legal or not.
There have been growing calls for the federal government to try and control some internet forums. Even the Prime Minister has expressed his concerns. Damien Ryan.
The One Nation Party is on the warpath over televised revelations of its attempts to get donations from the American gun lobby. It's denounced the documentary prepared by Qatari-owned broadcaster Al Jazeera as a hit piece of journalistic entrapment. Here's National Affairs correspondent Greg Jennett.
What do they call that big thing in the middle?
That is the Washington Monument.
Innocents abroad or political panhandlers on parade?
If One Nation could get $10 million,
that guarantees you balance of power.
The televised adventures of One Nation's likely lads have drawn nothing but condemnation.
Gangs. It is just... Our country's going into chaos.
It was compelling television. You almost had to have your fingers over your eyes, but you're peeking through.
Being drunk is no excuse for trading away Australia's gun laws.
But James Ashby and Steve Dixon's alcohol-fuelled immersion into the ways of America's gun lobby is condemned for many reasons, and not all for their conduct.
This 3-year entrapment exercise is completely unprecedented in the history of Australian democracy.
The techniques employed by the programme's producers, Al Jazeera, complete with fake lobbyist Roger Muller, has enraged One Nation, including its leader, captured in hundreds of hours of secret video recordings, appearing to suggest the Port Arthur massacre may have been a conspiracy.
An MP said it would actually take a massacre in Tasmania to change the government.
Now battling what's said to be an unfortunate tick bite, from her sickbed, Pauline Hanson's tweeted she's shocked and disgusted with the Al Jazeera hit piece. And the ABC's stressed it played no part in the production and merely bought the completed show. But debate over Al Jazeera's techniques is far from settled.
But in actively setting up that meeting, I think Al Jazeera crossed the line into something that was quite simply unethical.
Politically, the expose is not just a headache for One Nation. It also magnifies attention on how the coalition will approach Pauline Hanson's party when and where it matters most. Outside polling booths in May, when how-to-vote cards are distributed.
My message to them is very simple. Don't vote One Nation.
Every day he lies down and, just is supine in front of One Nation, he's tainting the Liberal brand.
Scott Morrison's holding out on preferences until the starter's guns fired on the election. Greg Jennett, ABC News, Canberra.
We've heard just before about the bloke that you call in your book the real Australian Ted Sarong. What exactly was his role and why was it so key to our early involvement?
Ted Sarong, his very name raises very heated opinions. Some regard him as a charlatan, others regard him as a hero. He was an elusive character, he was an amazing ego, he was, we saw in the film clip just the way he dismissed the question.
Yes.
He was in some ways a creature of his own imagination, and yet he was also an extraordinary man in many other ways, in many real ways. And for instance, you look at him he worked for the CIA throughout.
Right.
He was instrumental in the Phoenix program. The Phoenix program was basically a team of assassins who went out to destroy the Viet Cong infrastructure, the couriers, the tax collectors, the farmers who were feeding the enemy. So the war descended to a pretty ugly, very ugly phase in the later stages. Sarong was involved in training these assassins through the National Police Academy in South Vietnam. But in the end, Sarong, you know, his redeeming features emerged. At the fall of Saigon, he was still there, trying to help. He was trying to round up his friends, trying to help the South Vietnamese find some way out. And he was there right till the end. He was the longest-serving Australian in Vietnam.